who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames I whip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bunny. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.
Hello. Hi, you guys. What's going on? Hey, Donnell, how are you? So for those of you who are first-time viewers, welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson. I'm Dr. Jefferson. I am a psychotherapist, clinician coach, clinician trainer for the clinicians, and a whole lot of things. But typically on this channel, I talk about accountability factors that affect the Black community and those sorts of things. But today we're going to kind of shift gears a bit. And we're going to talk about things that are more related to my secondary podcast, which is Love and Intimacy. However, this is also related to the Black community as a whole, because this particular question comes in from a viewer in New York. And she's tethered to a group that I have for alternative lifestyle people. I always say, sometimes Western culture is very difficult to not only adapt to, not only to understand, but also to kind of get in the rhythm of. However, in recent years, the last couple of decades or so, last 20 some odd years, 25 years or so, you've seen more people who are a part of pop culture in Western culture. And what popular culture in Western culture means is what is typically the norm, right, for a particular culture of people. But so what we've seen is that I'm doing great. We've seen is that those people generally, they have a standard. And their standard generally is non-monogamous, intimate partner relationships with the exclusivity component. That is an essential component to that, when it comes to thriving relationship. So what monogamy is, just to kind of do a breakdown of terms so you guys have a full-on understanding of everything that we're going to discuss, and then everything that you've probably been conditioned to, and just to do a little quick reconditioning for the sake of the purpose of the video, and so that you guys have a clear understanding of everything that I talk about today. So monogamy is when two people come into a relationship, and those two people have not been in a relationship with anyone else prior to being with one another, and their intentions in that relationship at the point that they are seeking out one another or vetting that relationship, both of them collectively have the idea or mindset that that relationship is going to be longitudinal. It's going to last a lifetime, and nothing else will follow. So if we look at the relationships of the past, if you guys are really biblically bound or whatever, you know that those relationships are based off of the idea of until death do us part. And so in monogamous culture, it's about preservation of self for the sanctity of the relationship. And so what that means is when a woman gets into a relationship with a man, and this is oftentimes one of the points of contention for Kevin Samuels, looking at modern day women versus, the women that are very traditionally set in previous raised in the 60s, 70s, right? So what that looks like is that woman expects for that man to protect, provide, and, nurture her in the ways that he is supposed to as the leader of the family. And as a result, she offers chastity, her pureness and her body, and also her guidance, and all of those other very important things that women are responsible for as being your compass, right? Or partner, helpmate. But non-monogamous exclusive relationships are relationships that mimic the ideals of and concepts of or constructs of monogamous relationships, but they go a step further. And now those same said people are having the same ideas shape their practices in relationships. However, it's based off of a one at a time type of thing. So they're not going to be monotonous. So they're not going to be in one relationship with one person for a lifespan, only for as long as that relationship lasts. But the dynamics of the relationship or the structural dynamics look like they are definitely tethered to one another. They're definitely forsaking all others for the time that they're committed to one another, right? So those are what non-monogamous committed relationships look like, right? So on the other hand, you have people who are part of alternative lifestyle culture. And those relationships look nothing like the relationships that I mentioned before. And also to add to the aforementioned, you guys got to also think about pop cultures, non-monogamous relationships, and monogamous relationships typically would include a male and female heterosexual relationship versus anything other than that. So then when we talk about alternative lifestyle culture, those are people who live outside of the bounds of what pop culture, not only in Western culture, but whatever culture and society they are physically actually tethered to and operating in every single day interactionally with other people. And so whatever the standard is for relationship in that particular culture, those people's relationship look a little bit different. So when we talk about today's alternative lifestyle relationship that this person is referring to, as far as her question, before we post up the question for the day, this relationship involves polyamory. Polyamory is not the same as polygamy, but polygamy is definitely one type of relationship that can be found under polyamorous couples. So it refers to the idea of polygamy and polygyny. So if you have a polyamorous relationship that leads to polygamy, there is one male suitor who is attached to however many wives may be a part of that particular dynamic. Typically, we call these triads and sometimes V's, depending on what the structural dynamics are of that relationship looks like. And sometimes they get even more complex and they are named a couple of other things, but that's a whole different segment, right? So you guys got to go check out Love and Intimacy if you want the breakdown of what all the different polyamorous structures look like under that. It's a total of about 14 to 15 different structures and dynamics, and people are in those structures based off of the way that their ideals shape what they desire for their outcomes to be in a relationship and how many people are party to that and what the communication flow looks like. So on the other hand, outside of polygamy, where those people are married and spiritually tethered to one another with different expectations, you have polygyny. Polygyny is when there is one female suitor who is the centralized component of the relationship, and she may have several different husbands. And so in those particular dynamics, they look a lot of different ways. Some women have several husbands. Some women have several husbands and wives. Some have a few husbands and wives, but the same structures are still there as far as the dynamics. Some of them are V's, some of them are triads, and some of them are brosos. It's so many other options. But the important component is that you guys understand that basic construct so that we can move into this discussion for today. And so the answers that I give this viewer are going to make more sense if you understand those basic constructs, in other words. So I guess before I move on, are there any questions? Anybody curious about anything that I've said so far? Are there any viewers who are a part of the polyamorous culture, alternative lifestyle here in America or otherwise, and have any questions or commentary they want to dedicate to the discussion today? I'll let my producer bring them up as they come, because this will be a kind of short discussion of the day, because I only have like an hour or so to get this done. Excuse me. So let's jump right into it. As you guys come in, don't forget to say hi. Don't be rude out there, okay? Or weird. Rude or weird and weird. Let me know you're in the audience, and if you got anything to add. If you have ever been in a polyamorous relationship, I want you to type 1 in the chat. If you've been in a monogamous relationship, I want you to type 2 in the chat. And remember the description I gave you of monogamy. And then also, if you've been in a non-monogamous exclusive relationship where the bounds look like monogamy, I want you to type 3 in the chat. And then I want you to now tell me, after you've done that, what your experiences look like and if you're happy in that particular dynamic. All right then, Donnell. So now the question of the day comes from Asia. I will not give you guys her last name fully. Asia B, and she is in New York. I first want to say, Asia, once I send this to you, because I am going to send her a copy of this video, I did suggest that she post her comment in the thread, because I have an active group where other people who are part of the poly community are very engaged. And sometimes it's helpful to get feedback from other people that are in the experience, and not the professionals, right? Because sometimes the lay people that you can relate to, have a different experience, have a different thing, period, to offer to the conversation. And I love to see the comments. I just do. I like to see the conversation and all that good stuff. So she is new to the poly lifestyle, and I want to welcome her. I think that that's a great move for you. I think that if it's something that you found that you were curious about, then it may be something that is beneficial to you. That's why I say welcome. It's definitely a different culture. Hey, Liz, how are you? So she asked the question, why are some men not willing to have a brother husband, but are so fixated on women becoming sister wives? And she did say, P.S., new to poly world and would like to be enlightened and not judged. So the great thing about the true poly society is that it's a group of people who are alternative lifestyle, and they do not come with judgments. There is, spiritual freedom. There is sexual exploration and freedom. There is cultural exploration and freedom, wealth of knowledge. And there's just so much there in that community. And I did notice that she got a ton of answers, and I am like super excited to kind of highlight some of the answers that some of the members posted. You said, I'm well, how are you? Amazing. Today is great. So I'm going to jump right into it. Okay. So the thing is, if a man, so the vast majority of people that you're exposed to, due to the fact that you are in America, in a society where a lot of people are now more curious, very much like yourself, the fact that you're here, the alternative lifestyle environment, community, and all of that looks very different here than it does in other countries. I think that the main reasons that many people find themselves very curious or fixated on moving into alternative lifestyle culture to the polyamorous relationships is because they've had either no success in monogamous or non-monogamous relationships that are exclusive, because people in those relationships in this day and age tend to have a lot of insecurities that shape them because of their experiences in the world and society we're raising our kids in. And so in this culture, there is a lot of deceit. In polyamorous culture, there are far less deceits. So because of the way the dynamics are created, because of the amount of involvement and engagement at the onset of creating these different dynamics, people they feel more free to love, and they feel more free to be whatever it is that they feel like they need to be in the moments that they need to be. And so I think that without that judgment, without that watchful eye, without that ego hawking over, waiting for you to mess up or do something this way or that way and be judged for it, and to be kicked out and said that you're wrong and things like that, I think it makes there is more flexibility there. However, I will say this. in the relationships that are polyandrous, you're going to still have to deal with the realities. Men are still men. And so there is a nature of a man that comes before his relational preferences. Okay. And so when you are taking a man who comes from a misogynistic culture and, you know, a male centric and central society where men are centered around the ideas that they built and they are responsible for the frutility of the world that we live in. You ever heard the term like it's a man's world? What do you think that song came from? Came from right here in America. And in that particular song, I think what happens is there is a call to men to recognize that yes, you as a man with your strength, with your might, with your wit, right? With your physicality and your abilities, you built this world. But you built this world so that it could thrive with and for those you embody and you take everywhere that you go. So these women, your children, you know what I mean? So that call, you know, had to be made for a particular reason. So you have to look at the fact that the nature of a man is one of a particular type of leadership, a particular type of representation. And it's sometimes very difficult for them to come with the type of energy they have naturally, right? That masculine energy. It's very hard for them to come into a situation with a woman, not just the woman being the centralized focus, because many men do okay with that. But in a society with very deep-seated insecurities around women and relationship experience and faithfulness and that, you know, that kind of mindset, they have a lot of traumas, and those traumas are unresolved. And they're trying to move and shift into these polyandrous relationships, oftentimes because they're like, well, you know what? All we're doing is saying that we can both be with this woman. And you know what I mean? I'm going to go do my own thing. That's what they're thinking first. Because the main relationship decision or shift mindset that happens for people who are part of pop culture that now want to transition, the main thing they think of when they think about polyamory, they're like, that's like a free pass for sex. What you mean? I'm not opting out. Opt me in. Opt me all the way in. I'm in there in the pool swimming, diving, actually. You know, whatever she got for me, I'm here for it. And I'm going to get that too. So that's the first energy. And that's the first mindset that not only men, but oftentimes young women have about polyamorous relationships. But the reality is, once they're in it and they see the amount of work, dedication, finances, and things like that that are necessary to maintain that culture and the lifestyle and the stability of the relationship, I see a lot of people phasing out and they get really disinterested very fast because the realities are sometimes a slap in the face. And it's like, whoa, I was in here because I thought that these folks have sex 24/9. And they realize that it's really not what they thought. So I try to help people understand the difference between monogamy and non-monogamous committed relationships and polyamorous relationships. The line of delineation is the amount of energy tethered to the amount of energies. Okay. So the amount of energy tethered to people who are in monogamous and non-monogamous committed relationships where they're exclusive to one another, those relationships look like you are only responsible for tethering your physical energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy to one other being. Okay. The bulk of it goes only to one other being. The submission contracts goes to one other being. And so when you're in polyamorous relationships, it looks like now your energy is tethered to multiple beings, even if those communication lines aren't so fluid, because that's another component that most people won't understand unless you're part of this lifestyle. But communication lines tether intimate connections, right? And the way that I kind of explain those intimate connections is very similar to the intimate connections maintained in those non-monogamous, committed, exclusive relationships and the monogamous ones. Okay. So it's like those are the people that you have a direct report to. You have fluid communication with. Those people are responsible for making decisions and that kind of stuff. And, the major decisions of the dynamic. And believe it or not, a lot of people who are part of popular culture find themselves in polyamorous relationships and they don't even know it. So blended families are one of the most common polyamorous relationships that are very comfortably seated amongst pop culture and Western culture. Blended families requires your energy to be tethered to several different people. And because most people think to themselves like polyamory equals sexual promiscuity for monogamous and non-monogamous exclusives, what you got to understand is that it has nothing to do with sex. Once you remove the sex component and you look at the responsibility of energy component, then you can have a deeper understanding of how these relationships not only work, but how they are built in the very beginning, how they're established. So if we look at these men, right, men have a difficult time just getting along with one another, less than being in a committed partnership when they are both very straight men, right? And that's hard in and of itself. And the thing about conflict resolution is what typically causes the most distress in polyandrous relationships. Now, if you have a polyandrous relationship and it's between a man and several women, or a couple of men and a couple of women, what you will notice is that it's more balanced then, because the energy sector is also balanced. So relationship takes a certain balance of energy types. Okay. Your masculine energy has to be balanced. So it doesn't mean that in a polyandrous relationships, I hear people all the time talk about, oh, well, you need a beta male, then women have to have a beta male if they're going to have that type of dynamic. And the reality is, no, you don't. You can have several alpha males, and because alpha males are very strong and secure in their sense of self, and they're very successful in their own right, they're able to get along with other alpha males because they have a mutual respect for where they lead in that relationship from. And so it has to do with communication. You have to be a really good communicator to be a woman that can vet that type of relationship and keep it stable and keep it going. And that takes patience and self-work, right? And I think that you have to realize that the purpose of your relationship and your presence is to secure the wealth of life through your intimate partner relationships in the context of what your polyandry looks like. And so if you understand that context in and of itself, life would be a lot easier for you. You will not have the company or entertain people that are not a good fit. You won't find yourself struggling to find the right kind of guy, because he'll naturally be gravitating towards you. Life is about energy, right? And so there are beacons inside of a woman, especially polyandrous women, that go off and attract the type of energy, not only that she desires, but also that you need for the balance in your life. Okay. So I think that that's a huge component. And I'm going to go ahead and make these suggestions to finish this up for you. I suggest that you connect yourself to a relationship success guru. And what they are is people who have not just looked at pop culture relationships, but universally looked at all relationships between people, right? Whether it's work relationships or intimate partner relationships that are monogamous, non-monogamous, committed relationships that are exclusive, or polyamorous relationships that look all types of ways. But those people have a very universal view of how relationships can thrive and look so many different ways. And that mindset, being so open and ready to receive you to better appropriate where your energy is going, can definitely be something that helps you calibrate self. But that is definitely a lower level of care or consulting, right? The other component I would recommend is a relational coach. So relational coaches are people who typically step in after the fact, and they help coach you through or navigate through those very difficult components of coming together that polyamorous relationships sometimes require. Because when I talked about there being a certain level of patience exercised, you also have to be willing to do the work, right? And so there is obviously a lot of work to be done. But I have to say, like on the outset, when things are very balanced and things are stable and your life is good and it's yielding the type of return that you expected or more, then it's a great investment. I always say the biggest investments that people fail to make in life are the investments in themselves and their success and happiness. They wait until they're very unhappy, very uncomfortable in life, and then they say, okay, now I'm going to invest in me. But before you invest in you, you first must be healed. You first must be whole. Okay. And that's where the therapist component comes in there. So therapists are healing professionals, either holistic or those who make necessary referrals for whatever conditions that may be causing you significant distress in your being. And those people can get kind of to the nooks and crannies of what's going on with you and find out whether or not you're a really good fit for polyamorous relationships in general, or if it's just due to unhealed trauma. And as a result of that unhealed trauma, you're now trying to distract yourself with other dynamics, other cultural subsets, in order for you to not have to live out what the trauma in that events continue to put you through, right? So, because sometimes it's better to seek that help. And unveiling those layers definitely is an investment as well, but I feel like it's definitely necessary if you find yourself doing things that are not part of your norm criteria behaviors. So the other one is a counselor. Counselors and therapists are different in so many different ways, but the main context is counselors are responsible for counseling, offering adequate counsel, right? So advice. So giving a listening ear and offering some advice for as to how you can make things more manageable in your day to day. And so you have some counseling professionals that have definitely been trained to be therapists, but they're not therapists. It's not the equivalent. And so if you need counseling and that's what you're looking for, those are more coping mechanisms based, surface behavior rendering changes, things like that. So not that deep-seated work that typically brings on a tremendous amount of emotions, emotional flooding, and things sometimes get worse before they get better. But just to kind of stay on the surface and keep you safe and keep you afloat, right? While you got your head above water, we're going to keep your head above water completely, so no anxiety presents, and you know how to manage it, engage it if it does. You can see it down the street or whatever. Also, I recommend a spiritual consultant because spiritual consultants are very much clinical, like a therapist, and so can help to align you with your greater purpose in life based on what you give them your higher power being. So it's really about helping you connect the dots that are misaligned or never were in alignment for you, right? That is leading to the relevant distress in your life that leads to maybe the perception that you need something that you don't necessarily need, like a polyamorous relationship. Now, if that's what you need, they could definitely help you tether and understand your energy forms inside yourself to manifest the outcomes that you're looking for, right? So those are my responses, and that's my answer. These are my suggestions for you to better your situation and to get a better hold of things. I feel like this was definitely a little bit of more of a complex question for someone just entering in. But I want to give you encouragement because it definitely gets better. Before things could get worse, of course, it's going to get better. There are millions of people who are part of natural polyamorous lifestyles, and some who are converting into polyamorous lifestyles. But what I will say, and I really hate to kind of say that, but the reality is you don't run into these types of issues if you have men that have been raised in polyamorous subsets already. So you have to ask yourself, do I want to create a man or a figment of what a man is that's polyamorous, or do I want somebody that's already seated? You know, because if you're curious, that's one thing. But if you're seated, that's another thing. And you want to tether yourself to the energy that is your equal and not opposite, because you know what I mean? Because that's just more distress, more arguments, more frustration. And they don't really understand that polyamory is 100% about transparency. Transparency and being forthcoming is something very, very difficult for people who are a part of Western popular culture, just naturally, because in that particular way, they are very much operating off of emotion, in the resilience of that component. And there's just so much on a person to try and protect the feelings of other people and to try and make the right choices, considering the emotions that they have and, that kind of stuff. And it's, some of those things tend to be more difficult is what I find. And looking at couples who come to me that are part of polyamorous culture, the betrayals are still there sometimes, but they look very different. So that's what I have. That's what I got. That's all that's there. So for you guys that have been watching, I appreciate you for watching, and maybe you learned something today. If your curiosity was sparked, if you feel like somebody in your system could benefit from this information, don't forget to hit the like button and share it. Don't forget to subscribe if you're a new viewer as well. So it's been good. Thank you guys so much for sitting through and taking your time and spending it with me tonight. I hope that you guys have a blessed and a productive night and everything goes well. So later days. Bye.
Who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I'll rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bunny. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.